Hello, and for today's equine learning segment, since last week we talked about leading, today we're going to build on that and talk about leading a horse through the mounting ramp. And Gail is standing here with Dreamer, who is very politely standing in the mounting ramp. Some of you may be familiar with it and have seen it before, but the mounting process can be very precarious and very dangerous if it's not done correctly. And today we're looking at it through the leader's point of view. If you were to lead the horse into the mounting ramp for another rider. So you can see it's got two solid structures on either side of the mounting ramp. One for the rider to stand up on and one for an offside person to stand on. So once the horse gets in there, they can't move. They have to stand very still, and a lot of horses can be claustrophobic. So our horses are very used to going into the ramp, but they need their leaders to be confident as well when coming through the ramp. So to start off today, Gail is going to show you the correct way to lead a horse into the mounting ramp, and I'm sort of going to narrate. And then after that, we're going to kind of go in the same pattern as we did last week and lead the horse into the mounting ramp incorrectly so you can pick out some of the things that she was doing wrong. So, Gail, go ahead and bring Dreamer in. So as you remember from last week, she's staying on the left side, and right about there, she's going to stop and turn to face Dreamer. She's going to back him in until he comes to a stop. And a lot of times when the horse gets situated in the mounting ramp, they need to be adjusted, whether they need to come closer to the block or get squared up, as we call it. Squared up means that their two front feet are even, and ideally their two back feet are even as well. In this case, we mainly just want them to be well balanced. So we want at least their two front feet to be even, as you see Dreamers are here. So another important thing and a common mistake that we see is, Gail, if you can demonstrate standing right in front of him. So in this position, it's a very subtle difference, but if Dreamer were to throw his head, he could then injure Gail or potentially injure the rider that could be getting on his back with that sudden movement. So we want the leader to stand slightly to the right of the horse, and she's still creating that physical barrier with her body, just slightly off-centered. So you can see she doesn't have a super tight grip on his head. He doesn't feel claustrophobic. And Dreamer's one of our horses that does stand very relaxed in the mounting ramp. Another hold that we might ask you to do on several of our horses is lightly holding on either side of that rope halter. And these are for the horses that like to throw their head, but you want to make sure that you don't get into a tug-of-war match with them. If you're pulling and tightening up really hard, then they're going to want to pull back even harder. This just gives them the cue to hold still. And some of our horses like to try and nip a little bit when they're in the mounting area, and this prevents Gail from being nipped at. So next, we're going to pause the video. Gail's going to come back into the mounting ramp, and you are going to pick out what she did incorrectly. All right, so she's going to bring him in again. All right, so a little bit differently than last week, I am going to tell you the incorrect things that she did, since this is something that you may not have learned before. So this one was a little subtle. You can see that she, instead of stopping and turning around to back him in, she just walked him straight through like this, and she could have been squished into the ramp and could more easily injure herself. And we will pause and do another one. All right, now she's bringing him in the third time. All right. I was waiting for it, because that's just about what always happens. So we see this a lot. Those are solid steps there. And if you notice the first two times that Gail brought Dreamer in, she was out about 1.5 feet or so from that mounting ramp. Because when the rider is getting on, especially if the horse decides to move their head, you can be thrown onto the stairs. Now Gail was being a little bit dramatic for the purpose of this video, but we see that happen a lot. So you want to make sure that you are standing past the steps so that when you go to turn around to walk out of the ramp, you don't fall. All right, Gail's going to bring Dreamer back in. So, Miss Gail, I think you're going to have to turn around and go again. Oh.
Can you rescue me?
I can rescue you. This happens a lot. So Gail's going to go around again, but if you were looking closely, she sort of brought him in at a really tight angle so that he had a really hard time getting around that corner. And if there wasn't an instructor there, or if I wasn't there to help her, he could injure his leg as he scrapes it on the corner of the mounting ramp. One last time. What are you doing wrong now? So, it's pretty obvious. She did everything right that time, till the end, where she's standing directly in front of him and holding his face really tight, which is going to create kind of an aggressive atmosphere for him to be in. If he wasn't such a good horse, he would be very angry right now. So, before you walk away, Gail, if you could demonstrate the correct way to walk out of the mounting ramp, which would be turning forwards again, standing on his left side, and when you hear the instructor and the rider say, instructor and or the rider say, walk on, walk slowly so that the instructor, if they have to, can get down the steps next to the horse. And we are going to pause. And to finish the video, we're going to show you how we mount or lead a horse into a situation where the rider only has to mount from the lower block. Not all of our riders need the higher ramp to mount. And I'm going to be Gail's offside person because you want an experienced volunteer or an instructor to be standing here to create that barrier for the horse. But you can see everything else was the same. She brought him in at a good angle, she stopped, then turned to face him and back him in so that he was nice and close to that block for a rider to be able to get on. The only thing we would then do before a rider gets on is square him up in the front, which can be done depending on how close he is to the edge, either a step forward or a half a step back. And then I'm the offside person, and I will stay here until the rider gets on. So that is an adapted version of the mount that we do, and I hope you learned something.